Hello and welcome back to another Team Tiny Hop. This is Penny with Pod Popper's Place, and this time for Team Tiny we are being inspired by, and today I was inspired by Kendra and her video on her YouTube channel at Cards by Kendra that features a trifold baby card. I am using a stamp and die set from Honeybee Stamps that unfortunately is no longer available, and a stars background that I actually created on my brother's Scan and Cut, and I will link the video tutorial that I used in the description below. Initially, I wanted to use some really old Stampin' Up! Paper that had already been stamped previously for my card. However, I found that when I started to color in the little pacifier and bottle, that the ink was not friendly to alcohol markers and was bleeding, and it just was not looking very nice. I'm kind of a fly by the seat of my pants crafter, and so I didn't write down all the measurements that Kendra listed in her video, which I should have, and I strongly recommend doing. But I do know that she started out with 2 A2 size cards and then trimmed one down, which is what I did. And then I did trim an inch off the bottom for the split part of the card, but you'll see later I actually end up replacing that. So if you do try to make this card, I would highly recommend using Kendra's measurements and kind of knowing what paper you want to use ahead of time and cutting those out. Because I am such a fly by the seat of my pants crafter, I decided to just go ahead and leave in all my mistakes in the video for you to see. I really wanted to do this a star background, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to use embossing powder or if I wanted to use the embossing paste, so I did it both ways. And as you can see, it's kind of a learning process. You have to make sure you do the steps in the right order for everything to turn out the way you want it to. As you can see, the embossing powder, because the pixie spray made it sticky kind of everywhere, it didn't allow the color to get through to the paper, and because of just all the extra pieces of clear embossing powder on there. And so those didn't really turn out quite as well as I wanted them to, and I don't end up using them. I may try to use them on something else later. And then the embossing paste, I had extra, and so I used some on a one of the blue pieces of paper that I had. I might use that later. And you just, I would recommend when you use embossing paste, use all of it, because it does create quite a bit, and sometimes you don't need as much as you think you do. And so always have a second plan as to what you want to emboss, if it just be another piece of paper or a different design, stencil, or whatever it may be. And it is a little bit difficult to clean if you haven't ever used it before, so make sure you do that right away. Clean all your tools and your table and everything right away, because it does get dry and hard pretty quickly. Also, for storage of the embossing paste, I have a piece of saran wrap or the press and seal over the bottle, and then the lid on top of it. It does start to get dried out, and so I did have to mix it up, and there was some chunks in it a little bit. So I don't use it all that often, and I have had this one for maybe 6 months. So if you don't use it all the time, be sure and make sure it's sealed really well so that you don't come to a big old hard lump in a bottle when you do go to use it. So I chose some paper from this paper pack that's a little bit old from Hobby Lobby, and I wasn't sure which ones to use, and I didn't have a large letter die set like Kendra used, but I did have these large stamps from Stampin' Up! That are older, and I do have a Scan and Cut, so I decided to go ahead and stamp out the letters and cut them with my Scan and Cut. And I tried to use this brayer that I got recently as part of this Spellbinders tool that has all these little gadgets that you can put on. The brayer, I don't know if it just seemed really, really hard and stiff and didn't really collect the ink very well, and I end up mostly just using half the stamp on one pad and half on the other and kind of blending them together. And I did get a little ink on shared ink on both of them, so I did have to clean that up, but I just felt like the brayer wasn't working how I really wanted it to do. Then once I had those cut from my Scan and Cut, I cut out a second set of letters from the Scan and Cut without the extra outline around the stamped image like you can do, and just use those for to make those more sturdy, since they'd be holding the two pieces of the card together. Ended up having a lot less space between the two pieces of the card than Kendra Kendra did. So be sure, if you want that larger gap, a more obvious space, to follow Kendra's measurements. I'm not sure why I really struggled putting this card together. I think it's just a new style, and plus it's a lot of area to cover. I'm kind of one of those people who just does an A2 card, does the outside really as great as I can, and then kind of leaves it there, where I have struggled with slimline cards because of how much space you cover. So I think this one was the same kind of thing. It just, there was a lot of space to cover, and you just wanted to fill it in and make it look complete. And so I just kind of really struggled to make sure that I was doing the best that I could to make it really look like it was a complete idea. One thing I know I would do differently is that I would make sure that I have enough of the star background, so that done the same way, so that everything matched inside the card. I think when I completed the card, I probably used some of the embossing paste and then some of the heat embossed powder. So it had two different styles in there, and I don't think it's that huge of a deal, but it's something that, as a perfectionist that I tend to be, it did bother me when I got finished with it that everything wasn't matchy. I do love the little sentiment, twinkle twinkle little star, do you know how loved you are? And so I did separate that and use half on that first fold and half on the inside. I really wanted to not use black, just such a harsh color for a baby card, but the gray ink pad I had was just too big and clunky to try and stamp just half of the sentiment on there. So rather than messing that up, I just went ahead and used my VersaFine, my tiny little block that I loved. It's great for sentiments. So as I come to the inside of the card and finish the sentiment, I had to think of what else I could do, and so I ended up cutting out a moon and coloring that in a little bit and adding a few more stars, and then also the sentiment, welcome sweet boy. And because this die set did not come with dies for the words, just for the bunny and all the little accessories, I did use my Brother Scan and Cut to cut out the sentiments, and I just used a pencil to outline them as far out as I could, wanted to go, and then you just cut on the inside of the line rather than at the line. I probably could have cut a little bit further inside the line than I did, but I'm always really scared about how far in do I go without worrying about cutting off some of the sentiment. That about finishes up my card, except for a little sparkle and shine and some sequins. Thank you so much for being here and watching. I hope you would go along the hop and watch all the videos, give all the other contributors some love, and subscribe if you haven't already. Appreciate you. Thanks. Bye.